Welcome to this first episode of the Ishaan S Show. Today we'll be taking a look at the ransomware and cyber attacks facing our nation and talk about what's happening and what President Biden is going to do about them. The May jobs report just came in today. Did they meet expectations? And where did the 2022 midterms stand, and how's that shaping up 2024? We'll be taking a look at those stories and more today, Friday, June 4th, 2021. And welcome to the first episode of the Ishaan S Show. It is an amazing privilege to be able to speak to you guys from here today, and of course through podcasts, but it's still equally as exciting to be able to speak to you today. It's quite exciting for me because this is my first episode on my first podcast, and I couldn't think of something more exciting to start my summer break with. And looking at it, I think it'd only be fair for me to tell you a bit about myself before I get started and, we start this show. So if you couldn't pick up from the title, my name is Ishaan, and if you read a bit in the About tab of this podcast, you may have found that I am 15 years old, but I'm still quite interested in politics. I like to think that I know a little more than my peers about the political system, what's going on. I pay a little more attention, I feel. It's been something that I've loved to look at and analyze for, how long? I'm thinking 4 years now. I took a very vested interest in the 2016 election, and that's what really got me going for politics. I had an interest in this stuff before that, but I didn't really turn it into a hobby until about 4 years ago. I think there was a lot more involvement from the community, and so many people were taking action, and so many people were speaking more, and I think it would have been impossible for somebody like me who paid attention to this stuff a little less back then. It would have been impossible for me not to pick up on that much. At that time, of course, we were so divided, and Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were dominating the news cycle every single day. So it naturally got my attention. And I guess it must have stuck because I pretty much paid attention to politics every day after whenever I started liking it. I've watched the careers of different politicians from both sides of the aisle. I watched the Trump presidency with a close lens. I followed the Democratic primary. I watched every primary debate. I followed the midterms in 2018. I especially followed the 2020 U.S. presidential election. The Biden transition and the Biden administration is what I've been doing. So this podcast, it seemed like a natural next step for me. I wanted to get into some form of media and give my view, my thoughts about what's going on. And, a podcast wasn't actually the worst idea, I thought. And then I said, why not? Why don't I give it a try? And so here I am, talking to you through my podcast, the Ishaan S Show. Now, I think what makes this possible is that we live in a country with a very unique political system. I'm not saying that other countries don't have their own unique political systems, but I think the United States has a different kind of system where we have a simple two-party country. Now, don't get me wrong, again, other countries definitely have those two dominant political parties, Labor and Conservative, the BJP Congress, United Russia, and the opposition there. There's usually a leading party and the opposition party. But it's not, here in America, it's not like a parliamentary democracy where you have to build coalitions and work with one another a lot more to get anything done. And it's not like other presidential democracies where there are like 8 parties that are quite prominent in themselves, usually with 2 leading political parties, but it's not like other presidential democracies where there are like 8 parties that you have to pay attention to. Here in the United States, we have 2 political parties that run things. There's no like coalition building or that stuff. It's 2 parties They run the day-to-day operations, and power shifts between these two entities, the Democrats and the Republicans, all the time. And I think what really gets people into that stuff, what gets them interested in it, is the constant power shift or the influence or the policies or whatever the heck is going on up in Capitol Hill or the White House or the Supreme Court. And it's something to wrap your head around. Everything that happens in politics has a huge impact on your everyday life. You may not realize it, but politics can impact something as minor as when you can drive in the left lane or something, or as massive as potentially war. Politics covers every aspect of life. And now more than ever, with a world or a country and a world more interconnected than ever, I personally feel that it's more important for everybody to understand how politics works. And I hope to be an agent of informative politics. I want to report what's going on up in DC. I want to bring you my analysis and my insight about how I feel about what's going on, not my opinion necessarily, but just what I think might happen, why I think this is happening, etc., etc. And through it all, I'm going to try to come Tuesdays and Fridays, and I hope that you join me, and I hope that you take this seriously. I hope this comes across as a serious political news podcast that is designed to inform you about what the path that our country is going down, and what the future holds. How does the past impact the present? How does the present define the future? It's a lot to wrap your head around. So yeah, that's a bit about me, Ishaan, and a bit about where I intend on taking this show. And we'll be right back after this short break. Okay, so we're back from our break. And as I said in the opening, we are going to talk about a story that's been hitting our country by storm for a few months now, actually, over continuous occasions and events of this issue. And that's ransomware and cyber attacks that our country's been facing. If you don't know about what's going on, for the past few months, not even the past few months, since perhaps December, even when Trump was president, our country was facing a lot more cyber attacks than ever recorded before. And this wasn't in minor situations. This was in pretty big spots. I remember the first one that was in December during the Trump presidency, when I think the departments of the Treasury, Homeland Security, and other governmental agencies that were quite important, they were hacked. And the Microsoft Office feature, I believe, that was hacked, and they were looking through it, and in that moment of time, there was a big concern over the cybersecurity of the U.S. government. After a few months, we saw a few more attacks, mainly from Russia, China, and Iran, our adversaries. And in this modern time of cyber warfare, it's not uncommon. We do the same thing to them, they do the same thing to us. But the levels at which this was occurring seemed to get a lot more alarming. So between December and perhaps last month, there wasn't a huge issue going on. There wasn't a lot going on. But then in April, the U.S. Department of Justice started noticing a lot more government agencies getting hacked and a lot more government entities getting hacked after the December incident. So they created a special ransomware task force after they declared 2020 being the worst year for extortion-related cyber attacks. And this is an issue that even after April seems to be getting even more concerning by the day. I think you might have heard about the Colonial Pipeline hacking. That was when one of the biggest oil suppliers in the United States was hacked by Russian hackers. It's not definite or clear yet as to whether or not these people were state sponsored or whether they were their own private entity or if they're just cyber criminals. But we know for a fact that Colonial Pipelines was attacked or hacked rather by Russian criminals, cyber criminals. And this had a huge impact for many Americans in the South. Pipes had to be shut down and Colonial supplies a lot of oil, a lot of gas, and a lot of fuel for many Americans in the southern region of our country. So for a few weeks, there was a whole gas shortage. People were lining up in gas stations trying to get whatever they can to fuel their vehicles. It was chaos. And gas prices were also going up in the region, so that wasn't helping either. And then after that, a few other incidents have also occurred. Florida city, there is a city in Florida, their water supply was hacked. And then more recently, I'm pretty sure you might have heard about this one. This was one of the world's top meat packers, that are situated here in the United States. They have over 80 locations across our country. They had to shut down operations for a few days because they too were hacked. And this wasn't like any, and the hacks that we're seeing aren't like, they're getting into our system and they're corrupting it. They're also taking ransoms for it. They're hacking into our systems. They're doing whatever they want to do. And they're saying, we're not going to leave until you pay a price to us. That's the really concerning part. And what gets me personally a little more worried is that our government has been facing these attacks. Department of Treasury, Department of Homeland Security, and other federal agencies have been the target of this. That's a deeply concerning thing because this cyber warfare thing, it's very new. It's not something that I remember happening even 5 years ago. This has been happening far more recently in this new era of cyber interconnectedness between different countries. And as bad people really get their hands on these devices or these materials and this technology to really screw up countries, many people are being put at risk. I don't think we would ever see anything, truly devastating occur from this. I wouldn't want that for anybody in our country. But I think these criminals have the resources, and they've established it thus far. They have the resources to really interfere in our country's systems through these things, through their hacking. And many of them are situated out of our adversaries. So that's Russia, China, Iran, and other countries like that. But primarily Russia. That's one country that's been noted for these cyber attacks. In fact, the one from December were, as I said, the Colonial Pipeline one was Russian hackers, but the one from December is believed to also be a Russian attack. So it's concerning that big countries, powerful countries, are using this newfangled technology to hack one another and try to mess each other up. And it's not just our government agencies that are facing this. Colonial Pipeline is facing this. The meatpacking industry is facing this. Other industries are also facing this. A ferry operator in Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, and Nantucket were hit by this ransomware attack. The NYC subway system was a victim of this. There is a lot more ransomware cybersecurity concerns going on. Now, what is being done about it? Because this is a deeply concerning issue, and people are saying, "Oh, this is a cybersecurity issue and must be dealt with." I might want to take it one step further and say this could be a national security issue, because if our adversaries are able to hack into our systems and do this type of damage, and really impact the American people like this, this is more of a national security issue than anything else, and it should be dealt with. And there needs to be more investment in all of this, regardless of what it may cost, because we need to understand this issue more closely. We need to prevent these from happening. And we need to make sure that we can monitor it. That's the number one thing that should be noted. The president, who is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin, has said, President Biden said that he will be meeting with him in a few weeks, I believe. And there he plans on discussing this issue. He said that this will be a topic of discussion between President Biden and Putin. And it's a pretty important thing for them to discuss. And it should be something that should be noted, and it should be understood between one another. And U.S. intelligence agencies, I think now it's time for them to also begin preparing for more attacks. Intelligence agencies, defense agencies, any agency for that matter, and any private company, any big private company that has a huge impact on American lives, they should also be preparing for something like this. Because gas prices, food prices, meat prices, recreational prices, transportation prices, all of these can go up as companies get impacted by this in more devastating and severe ways. And then as for government issues that may come upon due to this stuff, I think that's something that must be addressed too. So I believe the Department of Homeland Security is now looking into this issue. As I said earlier, the Department of Justice has created a special task force to look into this. And President Biden has said that this is a top priority of his. This is a top priority of his administration. And he's been taking a little more action. So he signed an executive order, I believe, last month, requiring companies doing that service the government or help the government or provide any type of support for the government and through their services to improve their cybersecurity practices. And other than that, they have also said that the administration is building an international coalition to hold countries who harbor ransom actors accountable. So international coalitions are being formed. People are looking into this. There's more action being taken right now to do this, which is good. And I think it should be something that should have been done earlier. But better late than sorry, right? So that's what's going on with the ransomware and cyber attacks. And we'll be monitoring this closely, and we'll bring to you any stories that might come out of this. We'll be right back after this. Okay, so we're back from our break. And now we're going to be talking about the May jobs numbers. So every month, if you didn't know, the federal government provides the American people with the number of jobs created or attained by Americans every month. They deliver that report every month to us. And so this month, last month, for the month of May, the American economy was able to produce about 559,000 jobs. That's 559,000 people, at least about 559,000 people getting a new job in the month of May. So that's that in more normal years, that would actually be a pretty good number. For some context, throughout all of President Trump's term, at no point in the monthly jobs report did we get 559,000 jobs. So that should give a sense of just how many jobs we've seen. Like, this is a lot more than we usually get to see. But I don't think this is like something amazing for President Biden to claim credit for. We are recovering from a pandemic, and our economy is also recovering with that. I should remind you that throughout 2020, 50 million people, 50 million plus rather, filed for unemployment benefits or had claimed unemployment in some capacity throughout the year. So 50 million people need to get their jobs back. And for the most part, it's been a process that's been going on since March, when we first saw those alarmingly high numbers. Now President Biden is claiming that he delivered the most jobs. On his Instagram earlier, he posted that he created, I believe, 2.1 million jobs in his first 4 months. And compared that to President Trump's 680,000 and Ronald Reagan's 280,000 jobs. So, yes, the 2.1 million metric is pretty good. And in a normal year, I think President Biden would receive a lot of praise for this type of productive work. But really, if millions of people lost their jobs, regaining those jobs are not necessarily a net success. So for President Biden, he should be happy that many people got him, but not too happy. Like, he shouldn't be celebrating, saying that, wow, I'm the greatest job creator of all time. He didn't. He did not do that. Or, well, he can claim credit for it, but really it's just a recovering economy. So that many people filed, or rather claimed that they got an employment and that they have a job now. So that's fine. And, you know, this economic recovery has been slow in some regards, but fast in others. I'd say that this economy or economic recovery started probably in April of last year. Now, you may be wondering, Ishaan, are you stupid? We were in the middle of a pandemic. We were in the beginning of it in April. And you might be right, but really, millions of people, or not April, May rather, so a month from last year. So what had happened was millions of people filed for unemployment through the month of April. I remember getting the jobs report every Thursday, and it said, this many people lost their jobs, this many people lay off, you know. But I knew that people were also getting hired back in May itself, and that number had been consistently increasing. Now, to President Biden's credit, that many jobs, he did create substantially more jobs in his first 4 months in office so far. He has created that many jobs, about 2.1 million. But, you know, it's nothing to write home for. So now, economists say, according to ABC News, economists note that the economy is in an awkward place right now. It's recovering from a devastating crisis. But the speed and the rebound, it's just showing us how modest this growth is. I mean, yeah, 560,000 jobs, big deal. But really, if you look at the net growth of like actual new jobs that, you know, people haven't had before, that's not a lot. That's not a large amount in that. So this economic recovery, what I will say is that this jobs report is indicative of just how many people are getting back and how fast our economy is recovering. So far, this 560,000 jobs is it's a big number in comparison to previous events, and it's been consistently increasing too. So and then pay is also up right now. People are getting more money as more jobs are getting added to the economy. More people are getting pay. And I think that's an incentive from employers' parts to bring in more workers right now, because employers are not getting the work that they need done right now. So they're trying to get any possible incentive to get people back. So that pay raise, I'm not surprised with that happening. And this also brings up a new discussion on the unemployment insurance issues that are going on right now. Many states have been revoking unemployment insurance for people that have been on it for a specific period of time. States like Florida come to mind. Governor Ron DeSantis there, he repealed or revoked rather federal job unemployment insurance to people. And this is a move on mainly many Republican states to get people back to work and to get people in the workplace. And and they claim that that's the only way we're going to do things. They say that people are using the unemployment insurance to just stay at home and not do anything and get their check. But Democrats, on the other hand, argue that this is really important for it's really important for for unemployed people, specifically people of color, who have been laid off or have lost their jobs at disproportionate rates. The unemployment insurance is really important. So that debate is still going on right now. But overall, with 559,000 jobs added to our economy last month, really, it's indicative of how fast our economic recovery is going, steady, but consistent growth. And it also shows that we're on a path headed to normalcy. And I think that's all anybody wants right now. Of course, people want jobs and people want to get back to work, but we also want to get back to a sense of normalcy. And as we see more people getting back into the workforce, it shows that we are entering that normal part of our lives that we really miss from over a year ago. And for the final segment of this episode, we're going to be talking about something that I intend on bringing up every episode, if not every episode, as many episodes as I can. And this will be more of a report or an update on the 2022 midterm elections. So for our listeners who don't know exactly what I'm talking about, in the United States, we hold elections every 4 years for president. That's usually the one most people know about. But we also have our two houses of Congress, the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is up every 2 years, and 1/3 of the Senate is up every 2 years. So usually in a or in an election year that's not a presidential election year and it's an even year, that's usually regarded as the midterm elections. That's because it's in the middle of the incumbent president's term. So next November in 2022 will be the middle of President Biden's first term in office. And usually midterm elections are a very interesting thing for people to watch in the political field. It's really important, midterm elections. To give an idea, the 2018 midterms, which was in the middle of President Trump's term in office, Democrats gained control of the House by a very large margin, actually. I can't remember just how many seats, but they got control of the House of Representatives. And they failed to get control of the Senate. In fact, they lost seats there. But what it showed was there was and also in 2018, I should note, that it was a large progressive year. So many progressives, many liberals made it into Congress. So that 2018 midterm election, like most midterm elections, was really indicative of what the president's standing was across the country. And mainly, it was more of a disapproval of the incumbent president. And most of the time in most elections, that's usually what happens. That's usually what happens in most midterm elections. It's usually just an election to reject the sitting president, and it's the incumbent party's goal. I don't think incumbent parties really have the intention of being able to gain too many seats. I think their main goal is to just make sure they don't lose that many seats. So in 2018, the Democrats were able to get control of the House. I can't remember how many seats they picked up, but they did pick up quite a few, and that had a huge impact because it was mainly the impeachment of President Trump, not the second one, but the first one, that really was caused by Democrats being able to gain control. I believe, now that I have it up, the net change for the 2018 midterms in the House of Representatives was a 41-seat gain for Democrats. That's how they got their majority in the House of Representatives. They gained 41 seats in the House. And that was a mainly rejection year for President Trump. That's what most pundits had come to the conclusion to. And then President Obama actually faced a tough midterm himself in the year 2010. So 2 years after him becoming president, President Obama's party, the Democrats, they lost control of the House after a very large victory. They lost control of the House in 2010, and Republicans gained a whopping 63 seats in the House. 63 seats they gained. And through that, they got control of the U.S. House. So midterm elections are usually elections that many incumbent parties, mostly incumbent parties and leaders, are get very nervous about. I don't know about President Biden, where he stands. Of course, we are only 4 months into his term, and we're only 4 months into Democrat control of the government. Right now, the Democrats do control the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. We are only 4 months in, but so we can't really make the determination of whether or not Joe Biden is nervous about it. Earlier this week, I believe in New Mexico, there was an election for Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland's seat. She had resigned from her seat in order to become Secretary of Interior, so they had an election there. And in New Mexico, I can't remember the name of the candidate, unfortunately, but what I do remember is that the Democrat, won by a 17% margin. She won with a 17% margin. So that was, I think, the first hint at President Biden's approval in this. But I don't think that's a pretty good indicator, only because the seat that we're talking about in New Mexico was a pretty reliable Democrat seat. In fact, Joe Biden won that seat by 23% in the election, and Secretary Haaland won that seat by 23% herself at the time. So it's not really the best indicator of where things stand, the New Mexico seat. I think later this year in November, when some states have their off-year elections, those are usually elections right after, or in the year after a presidential election, or right before one. We might get some indication of that, usually in November. And many states, not many states, but a few states will be holding elections. California will be holding one. I think it's fair to say that that's a safe Democrat state. But two states, Virginia and New Jersey, will be holding gubernatorial elections. And then there are, across the country, scattered around, House of Representative seats. Many of them are really important for the Democrats, and not as much for the Republicans, because some of those seats are safe Republican seats. At least that's how I feel about them. Many of them are safe seats, but I think in this situation, for the time being, throughout 2021, the control of the House and these off-year House elections are going to be really important for the Democrats. If I'm not wrong, and I may be wrong, I don't remember that well, but I believe the Democrats' majority in the House of Representatives is the narrowest it's been in over 20 years. It's, I think, a 5 or 6 seat majority. And with absences and vacancies, I believe that's actually not even 5, but 4 or 3 or 4 seat majority in the House. So Democrats do have a lot of liability right now in the House. Like, they could lose a lot of votes and passing important bills in this time. And it's probably more, the feeling is probably more on their side of worry or excitement, the feeling of an extreme feeling, that type of feeling. I think the Democrats have that more than Republicans. Republicans have their own goals, and they have a few of their own issues that they're dealing with right now. But the Democrats are probably a lot more worried about their prospects in 2022. And House elections can really change. Unlike Senate elections, everybody's electing 2 people to represent them in the Senate, and only one of them is usually up in an election year. So, Senate elections are probably not super indicative of where the country's at. Right now, it's a 50-50 tie in the Senate, but that's different. The House, however, it's different pockets of population across the country that are sending their own representatives to the U.S. Congress. So that's a lot more reflective of the overall party alliance, or not party alliance, party allegiance and party support amongst the American people. So while President Biden did win by bigger margins in some states than the others, Republicans still gained a large amount of seats in the House in the 2020 election. And they closed that, even though Democrats were expected to make gains over their existing majority, they lost seats. And Republicans made, I believe, a net gain of 12 seats in the House of Representatives. They added 12 seats. A net gain of 12 seats to their caucus. They won a few more states. But even though it was a year where Democrats were expected to win big. So the House of Representatives is far more indicative of what's going to happen. So this midterm election year is going to be really important for Biden. And I think what's really going to drive this is the rhetoric behind policies and politics right now. So I think one thing that proved to be really fatal for the Democrats last year, and mainly I'm talking about them because they were in the majority, what proved to be fatal for the Democrats in 2020 was this new rhetoric of things like defund the police and socialism and all kinds of things like that. Like the far left type of things. That's how every Democrat was being characterized, even though there were many moderate Democrats that did not support any of this. They were also being tainted in this light. And while the support for many of these movements is larger than others, they are not very representative of the Democratic Party. However, despite that, the Democratic Party lost many seats, mainly due to that rhetoric, but also in opposition to Joe Biden, of course. But a lot of it was driven by rhetoric. And midterm elections especially are driven by rhetoric. What is our country going down? What is the discussion? What are policies that are being discussed right now? So with President Biden spending $1 trillion right now, $1 to $2 trillion, and trying to work out an infrastructure package that's also $1 trillion or more on its own. They're still in talks about it, so we're not sure yet. But he's in talks about that. Trillions of dollars could be very difficult for Biden to explain to the American people. When President Obama did the 2008 financial crisis recovery plan and also did the Affordable Care Act, that proved to be so impactful on the Democrats' majority in the House at that time. The Republicans went out with this rhetoric that there is out-of-roof, crazy amounts of government spending. It's not representative of you. All these Democrats are trying to spend this much money, and that's how they gain control of the House. I feel like with President Biden doing something similar right now to President Obama didn't even spend $1 trillion on his plan. Combined maybe, but I know each individual plan was less than $1 trillion. I think it was in the 700 billion mark. And that proved to be so hard for him to deal with. I can only imagine what President Biden might have to deal with, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, what they might have to deal with in November. So thinking about it right now, I feel like the Republicans, like any opposition party, have a better chance. I won't say that about the Senate, but I will say about the House. I think the Republicans at this time have a much better chance of regaining their majority in November in 2022 than the Democrats have of retaining it. Of course, we are we're not 18 months out anymore. We have hit the 18 month mark. We are now less than we're over a year out. We have a lot of things to take a look at. We still don't have all candidates ready. Wisconsin Senator, for example, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson hasn't decided whether or not he's running for re-election. He's promised that he wouldn't run for re-election in 2016 when he was running for a second term, but of course that may change. President Trump has already indicated that he would like Ron Johnson to run for re-election. We don't know about him. We don't know about many Democrats, whether or not they're running for re-election. And there are all kinds of retirements going on, and there are a few more that we may expect to come. I'm not saying they will happen, but there are a few other retirements that I have my eye on at the moment. We'll see if those announcements come. But at this time, I think the Republicans have a pretty fair shot at getting the House. And the Democrats, I don't know about the House for them. I don't think they have a good chance of retaining it. We'll need to see, of course. And then for the Senate, it's a 50-50 tie right now. So it's literally never been more divided than it is right now. And in the Senate, with so many Republicans announcing their retirement, I believe it's 5 right now. So 5 Republicans are announcing their retirement from the U.S. Senate. So we'll need to see what exactly or who exactly we might see also retiring from the Senate. There are a few Democrats, I believe, might choose to retire. But the Republicans in the states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Alabama, and Missouri all have announced retirements, and all of them are Republican held. Now, for the state of Alabama, I'm not placing any money on that. I think that's a safe Republican state. Missouri, I don't think that's going to be very competitive. Although it's worth pointing out that in 2016, when Missouri was when the incumbent senator was up for election, Roy Blunt was up for re-election at that point in 2016. He won his election by a very narrow margin, despite the fact that President Trump won by 10 plus percent in the same state. So I don't think that will be too competitive, though. I think Missouri has been shifting quite fast into the Republican field and and I feel like that will probably be a Republican Republican hold. Now, my eye for the Senate is probably on the states of Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were huge shots in the 2020 election, if you remember. Ohio is also up. Ohio has a Democratic senator, Sherrod Brown, and Tim Ryan, a House member, a representative in the House, announced his plans for running for U.S. Senate in Ohio for 2022. I personally believe that he will win the nomination there, but we'll need to see, of course. And in North Carolina has a sitting sitting Democrat governor at this time, but they have pretty much everyone else as a statewide official as a Republican there, but they have one Democrat governor. So North Carolina seems a little competitive, even in 2020. And for the past few election cycles, really, it's been quite close. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% max has been the margins there. Other states that might get competitive, probably will, could definitely be states like Arizona and Georgia, 2 Democrat-held states, but in pretty Republican states. Arizona is more of a swing state. Mark Kelly is up there. He won his election against Martha McSally in 2020. He's up for re-election in 2022 because that year was a special election. And in Georgia, it's the same situation. Senator Raphael Warnock is up for re-election in 2022. and we'll need to see about him because he's voting a lot more ambitiously with the Democrats and not ambitiously, that's not the right word. I don't know why I said that. He's just voting a lot more. He's a lot more freer in terms of voting with the Democrats. Something you wouldn't expect of a Democrat senator in a state like Georgia, which is, with the exception of 2020, quite Republican. Another state, which I don't know if it'll be a swing state on the general level, but in the primary level, I think Alaska could be a prime target for Trump Republicans. The incumbent Senator Lisa Murkowski, she's up for re-election there. And you may have heard of Lisa Murkowski as being one of the more moderate members of the Republican Party. She's a moderate member in the party, and she has been vehemently criticized by President Trump for her moderate viewpoints and lack of support for the Trump agenda. He, meaning President Trump, has pledged to mount a very difficult race for Lisa Murkowski, but with their ranked choice voting system, we can. I feel like Lisa Murkowski may have a little more luck there, and I think she may end up just holding on to her seat for another 6 years. So, in conclusion, for the Senate, the states I'm watching are, I forgot another one. Iowa. Iowa's another state. Chuck Grassley, he is the oldest senator, I believe, in the U.S. Senate altogether. He's 89 or something, and he is currently deciding whether or not he wants to retire for this election. He hasn't said anything, and he said he won't make a decision until later. He won't make a decision until, I think, a year or 8 months out from the election. So we'll need to wait for his spot. But either way, Iowa is kind of a Republican state, but it's been seen more comfortably as a swing state still. I don't see it as a swing state yet, or anymore, rather. It's more of a Republican state. But I'm still going to keep my eye on Iowa. So for primary elections and for the general election, my eyes are on Arizona, Iowa, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Florida might be a bit of Florida's also another state, probably. Marco Rubio's up there. Florida Representative Val Demings might run for that Senate seat. She has yet to announce that, though. But most reports and many aides close to her are saying that she is probably going to run for U.S. Senate there. We'll need to wait for that announcement, too. So that's my view of the 2022 midterms. And about the 2024 elections, I feel like there's going to be, whatever happens in 2022 is going to be the clearest indicator of what's happening in 2024. It's going to be like, it's not going to be like 2018 and 2020. In 2018, there was a huge Democratic push. And more like a push against Donald Trump. There was a huge movement in 2018, whereas in 2020, more people just voted against Donald Trump on the presidential level, whereas on the House and Senate and gubernatorial and state legislature levels, Republicans made a lot of gains. I don't think it's going to be this way in 2022 and 2024. I think for these 2 years, it's going to be a lot more hand-in-hand type of thing. Whatever happens in 2022 is going to be really indicative of what's going to happen in 2024. And I'm not sure when. In terms of 2024, I'm not sure when. But at some point, I'm probably going to drop a list of people, a list of Republicans who I have an eye on, who I believe might be running for that nomination in 2024. Either it'll be a list or it'll be announced on this podcast. I'm still trying to formulate that list. If you want to get more updates about what I'm going to talk about, or when episodes are up, or just breaking news in general, follow the Ishaan S Show on Instagram. Stay tuned for our next episode. And thank you for joining me on this first episode of the Ishaan S Show. I'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks. Bye.